Have you ever wondered what a single phone call can truly change? In a world teetering on the edge of wider conflict, a conversation between two world leaders can carry the weight of millions of lives. The recent call between US President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy is one such moment. This was not just a routine check-in, it was a critical discussion happening at a time when the skies over Ukraine are a constant battleground. With Russian attacks growing more intense, this conversation has become a focal point for international observers, offering a glimpse into the future of Western support for Ukraine's struggle for survival. The timing of this call could not be more significant. It comes just as Ukraine faces some of the most ferocious assaults since the war began. The capital, Kyiv, has been relentlessly targeted, and the threat to critical infrastructure, including the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, has reached a terrifying new level. The urgency is palpable. Every day that passes without stronger air defenses means more danger for civilians and a greater risk of a catastrophe that could affect all of Europe. This is the stark reality that formed the backdrop of the leaders' conversation, making their words and promised actions more important than ever. Furthermore, this discussion sets the stage for a major international peace summit scheduled to take place in the United Kingdom. What Trump and Zelenskyy agree upon now will heavily influence the agenda and the potential outcomes of that meeting. It sends a powerful signal to allies and adversaries alike about the strength of the US-Ukraine alliance. The world is watching to see if the United States, under President Trump's leadership, will deepen its commitment to helping Ukraine defend itself. The stakes are incredibly high, and this single phone call could be the first step toward a new phase in this devastating conflict. This is why the world is paying such close attention. The conversation is about more than just military hardware. It is about hope, strategy, and the unwavering resolve of a nation fighting for its freedom. It's about the leadership role the United States is willing to play on the global stage. For the people of Ukraine, the promises made in this call represent a lifeline. For the rest of the world, they are a crucial indicator of the path toward a potential peace, making the details of this high-stakes dialogue a matter of global concern. The central focus of the phone call between President Trump and President Zelenskyy was a matter of life and death air defense. Ukraine's ability to protect its cities and people from Russian missiles and drones is its most pressing need. President Zelenskyy made it clear that strengthening Ukraine's aerial shield is his top priority. Following the discussion, he confirmed that he and President Trump had agreed to direct their teams to work together on practical solutions. This means moving beyond simple promises and into the detailed work of getting more advanced defense systems into Ukrainian hands as quickly as possible. President Trump, according to Zelenskyy, was well informed about the dire situation on the ground. This suggests that the American leader understands the gravity of the recent attacks and the urgent need for action. The agreement for their teams to meet separately is a significant step. It shows a commitment to hammering out the logistics of delivering and integrating new air defense capabilities. These are not simple weapons. They are complex systems that require training and support. The collaboration between their respective officials will be key to making sure this aid is effective from the moment it arrives. The conversation wasn't just about receiving aid, it was also about building a more self-sufficient defense industry in Ukraine. President Zelenskyy expressed a strong interest in joint arms production projects with the United States. This is a long-term strategy. It aims to empower Ukraine to build its own defensive tools, reducing its reliance on foreign supplies over time. Such a partnership would represent a deep and lasting commitment from the US, signaling that its support is not just for the current crisis, but for Ukraine's future security as a sovereign nation. In essence, the discussion was about creating a comprehensive plan to secure Ukraine's skies. It covered the immediate need for more interceptors and launchers to counter the current barrage of attacks. But it also looked ahead, laying the groundwork for a stronger, more resilient Ukraine capable of defending itself for years to come. This two-pronged approach, immediate help and long-term partnership, was the core of the conversation, reflecting a mutual understanding that protecting Ukraine requires both urgent action and strategic foresight. To understand why air defense was the top item on the agenda, one only needs to look at the recent events in Kyiv. Russia recently unleashed one of its largest and most devastating attacks on the Ukrainian capital. A terrifying combination of 539 drones and 11 missiles rained down on the city overnight, causing widespread destruction. Buildings were shattered, the air filled with smoke, and the sounds of explosions echoed through the streets. For the residents of Kyiv, it was a night of terror, forcing them into underground metro stations for shelter as their city burned above them. The human cost of these attacks is immediate and tragic. The latest assault on Kyiv resulted in at least one death and left numerous people injured. But the damage extends far beyond the casualties. Every missile that gets through erodes the sense of safety and normalcy, traumatizing a population that has already endured so much. These attacks are not just military actions, they are designed to break the spirit of the Ukrainian people. This relentless pressure makes the need for effective air defenses not just a strategic priority, but a profound humanitarian necessity to protect civilian lives. Compounding this crisis is the ever-present threat at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. A recent Russian strike hit a power line, cutting off all external electricity to the facility for the 9th time during the war. This is an extremely dangerous situation. The plant was forced to rely on its emergency diesel generators to power the cooling systems for its 6 shutdown reactors. The International Atomic Energy Agency has repeatedly warned of the catastrophic risk of a nuclear accident. Without a constant power supply, the potential for a meltdown becomes frighteningly real, posing a threat not just to Ukraine but to the entire continent. This dual crisis, the bombardment of cities and the precarious state of the nuclear plant, illustrates the sheer urgency of Ukraine's situation. The attacks are a brutal reminder that Russia continues to target civilian areas with impunity. Meanwhile, the power failures at Zaporizhzhia show how the conflict risks spiraling into a disaster of unimaginable proportions. It is this grim reality that President Zelenskyy carried into his conversation with President Trump, underscoring why every promise of support and every new air defense system is so desperately needed. Ukraine's requests to the United States are clear, specific, and honestly rooted in the urgent need to survive. At the very top of the list are more advanced air defense systems like the Patriot and NASAMS. These systems have already proven highly effective at intercepting Russian missiles and drones. But, Ukraine simply doesn't have enough of them to cover all its major cities and critical infrastructure. Each new system provided by the US can create a protective bubble over a population center, saving lives and preventing the destruction of essential services like power grids and hospitals. Beyond just the systems themselves, Ukraine desperately needs a steady supply of interceptor missiles to keep them armed. Firing these missiles is costly, and stocks can run low quickly during intense waves of attacks. So, a continuous and reliable supply chain for ammunition is just as important as the launchers. This was a key part of the discussion about strengthening defense capabilities. Ukraine is asking for a commitment that ensures its defenders won't have to make agonizing choices about which incoming threats to engage, simply because of a shortage of interceptors. A significant part of President Zelenskyy's vision, as shared with President Trump, is the idea of joint production. Ukraine wants to move from being a recipient of aid to a partner in manufacturing. This means establishing facilities on Ukrainian soil with American technology and investment to build weapons and ammunition right there at home. Such a move would have multiple benefits. It would create jobs, boost Ukraine's economy, speed up the delivery of essential military hardware, and make the country's defense industry more resilient against future threats. It really is a bold request that aims for a deeper, more integrated security partnership. Ultimately, what Ukraine is asking for is a comprehensive package of support that addresses both its immediate and long-term security needs. This includes more hardware to fight today's battles, a reliable stream of ammunition to sustain the fight, and a strategic partnership to build the capacity for self-defense tomorrow. President Zelenskyy's appeal to President Trump was not just a plea for help, it was an invitation for the United States to invest in Ukraine's future as a strong, sovereign, and democratic nation capable of defending its place in Europe. The United States is not alone in its efforts to support Ukraine. A coalition of world leaders is actively engaged in diplomatic and military initiatives to counter Russian aggression. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz also recently held a conversation with President Trump, where the situation in Ukraine was a central topic. Reports indicate that Germany advocated for increased air defense support for Ukraine, showing a united front among key NATO allies. This demonstrates that the pressure on Washington to act is not just coming from Kyiv, but from its European partners as well. These diplomatic efforts are happening in the shadow of Russia's escalating attacks. Some officials, like Poland's foreign minister, have interpreted the timing of the recent assault on Kiev as a deliberate challenge from Russian President Vladimir Putin. He suggested that Putin was, in a way, mocking President Trump's attempts to broker peace, essentially daring the West to respond. This context adds another layer of urgency to the diplomatic maneuvering, as leaders work to show that such provocations will only strengthen their resolve to stand with Ukraine. Looking ahead, France and the United Kingdom are taking a leading role in organizing the next major diplomatic event. French President Emmanuel Macron and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer are set to co-chair a crucial Ukraine summit in the UK on July 10th. This meeting will bring together key allies to coordinate their strategies and reaffirm their commitment to Ukraine. The involvement of both France and the UK highlights a strong, united European push to find a path toward a just and lasting peace, working in concert with American efforts. This web of high-level conversations and planned summits paints a picture of a coordinated international response. While the US-Ukraine talks focus on direct military aid, European powers are simultaneously reinforcing the diplomatic and political fronts. This combined approach aims to create a powerful synergy, strengthening Ukraine's hand both on the battlefield and at the negotiating table. The world's democracies are signaling that they will not be divided, and that their support for Ukraine's sovereignty remains steadfast. After their important phone call, both President Trump and President Zelenskyy shared insights into their discussion, setting a tone of constructive partnership. President Zelenskyy was quick to express his gratitude for America's ongoing support, especially on a day as significant as US Independence Day. He stated that he and President Trump had a meaningful conversation, and that they had agreed to instruct our teams to work on enhancing Ukraine's protection from air attacks. This careful wording highlights a move toward concrete action and follow-up, which is exactly what Ukraine needs. President Zelenskyy also emphasized his country's alignment with American peace proposals. He noted that a fair agreement is the ultimate goal, and that Ukraine supports US efforts to end the war and restore stability. This statement is strategically important, as it positions Ukraine as a willing partner in peace negotiations, provided they are just and respect its sovereignty. By publicly backing American-led initiatives, Zelenskyy strengthens the diplomatic bond between the two nations and encourages continued US leadership in resolving the conflict. On the American side, while President Trump has not released a detailed readout, his senior officials and allies have echoed the theme of strong support. The message coming from Washington is one of continued commitment. Andriy Yermak, a top aide to President Zelenskyy, described the call as very important and hinted that more specific details about their agreements would be forthcoming. This suggests that the conversation was not just symbolic, but resulted in tangible plans that are now being worked on behind the scenes by their respective teams. The combined statements from both sides project an image of a renewed and focused alliance. Zelenskyy's public thanks and alignment on peace efforts, coupled with the promise of detailed follow-up work, create a narrative of progress. The language used was deliberate and positive, aimed at reassuring allies and sending a clear message to Russia that the partnership between the US and Ukraine remains robust. The world now waits to see these words translated into the promised military and industrial cooperation. All eyes are now turning to the upcoming Ukraine Peace Summit in the United Kingdom, scheduled for July 10th. This high-stakes gathering, co-chaired by French President Emmanuel Macron and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, is seen as the next major milestone in the international effort to support Ukraine. The primary goal of the summit is to forge a unified strategy among allies. Leaders will aim to coordinate everything from military aid and financial support to sanctions against Russia and a shared vision for a potential peace process. It is a chance to present a strong, united front to the world. A key hope for the summit is to build on the momentum from the recent US-Ukraine discussions. The agreements on air defense and joint production will likely be presented as a model for other nations to follow. Leaders will be looking for concrete commitments from all participating countries. The agenda will likely focus on practical steps, how to accelerate the delivery of weapons, how to tighten the economic screws on Moscow, and how to create a framework for long-term security guarantees for Ukraine. The ultimate aim is to create a clear, actionable plan. The world is hoping for a clear and powerful message of solidarity to emerge from London. For Ukraine, the summit is an opportunity to secure the broad international backing it needs to continue its fight and to eventually rebuild. For its allies, it is a chance to demonstrate that their resolve has not wavered in the face of a prolonged and brutal war. A successful summit would send an unmistakable signal to Russia that the international community will not stand by and allow a sovereign nation to be destroyed. As the summit approaches, the stakes could not be higher. The outcome could significantly influence the trajectory of the war in the months to come. Will the world's leaders emerge with a bold new plan? Will they make the hard commitments needed to give Ukraine the tools to win? The world watches and waits, hoping that the road to London will lead to a path toward a just and lasting peace. The discussions that take place there will be a critical test of international unity and a defining moment for Ukraine's future.